Hi, welcome to my blog, Sex and the Signposts. Most of you, if you read my blog, are used to me actually writing, but for a change, I thought I'd do a bit more of a vlog and actually read you little bits of little snippets of my book, Sex and the Signposts, which is available on Amazon. I'm going to start today with the prologue, so if you're sitting comfortably, I will begin. I don't know why I started keeping a diary, except I remember the need to get organised, and originally just kept it for arrangements and appointments. These, of course, were mainly for Max, keeping track of his numerous hospital and doctor's appointments, not to mention the ones for the solicitors who were fighting his court case. We had embarked on suing the hospital for his failed back operations. I needed to have them in my diary because I went with him to most of them, in my role of the dutiful and supportive wife. I spent endless hours trawling through medical records and writing long and detailed emails to his solicitor. This was in addition to working full-time. I was the breadwinner, running the home, sorting out the finances, supporting the children, and not to mention walking the numerous dogs he had collected when he was too ill to manage, and virtually worshipping the ground that he walked on. But then, as the storm clouds gathered over my marriage, I started scribbling about how I was feeling and found it a useful tool in coping with the day-to-day nightmare that my life had become. Relegated into the spare room by my husband of 18 years, accepting this insult because he was too ill and needed more space, I comforted myself with scrawling in the book and reading the whole collection of Harry Potter novels one after the other. That was escapism at its best, and boy, did I need to escape. Writing the anecdotes in my diary just seemed to help. From my window, I could see a huge pine tree in the woods beyond, and I would stare at the tree for hours, dreaming of the day when Max and I would be on even ground again. I found the view calming, as it stood still and strong in all weathers, just like me, I thought. It was a symbol of being resilient in the face of adversity. Ironic then, that when the marital home had to be sold for the divvy up, the only view I could afford was the terraced house opposite and the local cooperative. Said husband, of course, would be surrounded by pine trees and views in his new life in the country. They say that you covet that which you see every day, and whilst I was coveting the pine tree, he was coveting the woman who lived next door. This, of course, was the real reason I was seconded to the spare room, and it would seem that the coveting had been going on for some years. The discovery of this betrayal left me incandescent with rage. The rage, although directly firmly in his direction, and of course her next door, was partly turned in on myself. How could I have been so stupid as not to have known? Was I blind? Was I naive? I berated myself for days, kicking myself all the way up the garden path that divided our two houses. Of course, I was none of those things. But there is none so blind as those that cannot see, and I couldn't see it, even though it was right under my nose. I had had my suspicions, and my woman's intuition had been telling me that something was badly wrong, but they had been very, very clever. My delightful husband never ever went out in the evenings. In the last 5 years, and due to his repeated back operations, he had laid upstairs watching TV night after night, and had only gone out a mere handful of times. How, then, had this affair been conducted, and when? The answer was obvious. During the day, whilst I and her extremely hard-working husband were out earning a crust. My husband was disabled out and she worked very part-time. They must have been sharing a lot of afternoon delight. I must admit, I had wondered why he kept getting repeat prescriptions of Viagra, something he'd been given ad lib due to his spinal condition. He certainly wasn't giving me the benefit of them, and I was naively hoping he was stockpiling them to use with me at a later date, or maybe selling them to his mates. God, how stupid was I? The amount of barefaced lies he must have told me should be recorded in the Guinness Book of Records. The revelations left me on my knees. I ranted when he told me he was off to his new life in the country with her, something that I had always dreamed about and still to this day cannot watch the TV show Escape to the Country. I screamed when he told me that it had been going on for over 5 years. I fought with him and I slapped her, and then I felt a great deal better. Once the storm had subsided, I drew a sharp intake of breath and evaluated my position. So this was it. I was going to be on my own. A middle-aged woman, loyal wife for 18 years through lots of sickness and not much health. Thrown on the rubbish heat of singledom, alone and bloody terrified. I gave myself a good talking to and decided that this betrayal was not going to beat me. Quoting to myself an adage that I'd read somewhere, it's not what life throws at you, but how you handle it that counts, I decided that I was not only going to handle it, I was going to wrestle it into submission. Resplendent in red dress, with high heels to match, and a glass of champagne in hand, I supervised his removal from my life and into the waiting van. I asked sarcastically, "Now have you got everything?" His response was a steely glare. I smiled, sipping my champagne, as the leather Chesterfield that he had humbly asked if he could take left the house and giggled loudly as it was loaded onto the van. I'd been kind enough to buy him and his new squeeze a housewarming present. It was a hot June day, and his present would be warming nicely in the springs of the family Chesterfield. I wonder how long it will take them to find that nice piece of haddock. The thought of it rotting away and them frantically trying to find the source of the smell gave me a great deal of comfort in the days that followed, as did the arms of a rather gorgeous toy boy or two. Now this is where my diary becomes much more interesting. I'll leave it there today. I hope you enjoyed the prologue, and I will read you chapter 1, Vomit and Vino, next time. Thank you for listening. Bye bye.